Symira Shelton. Let's see. I'm powerful. I'm strong. I'm a mother. I'm a leader in my profession. I'm confident. I know where I want to go. I know my vision. I love people. I love children. I'm very creative. It was very hard because I was not expecting, after almost 13 years, to have another child. So I went into a very deep depression mode because I was like, no, how am I going to minister to women? How am I going to help women? And I just had another child out of wedlock. So actually, God had to deal with me. I can tell you that we contemplated everything, whether we was going to keep her. Hate to admit that, but we did. It was very difficult because I was thinking about what would other people say, what would, how's my family gonna, what are they gonna think, what are my children gonna think, because to remind you, I do have 2 older children. So it was very hard, but now that she's here, she's a little girl, so I just love her. She's really, actually, it's the sole purpose of me wanting to push forward, me wanting to get out of the opinions of other people, because I now have an example to set for her. I have to set the tone for her. So she is a big part of my why. Once I got over the whole turmoil of me, well, at least I thought at that time, of me being pregnant. My pregnancy wasn't easy. It was very tough, very difficult. I was constantly sick. I actually bled until I was about 12 weeks pregnant. In and out of the ER, they was telling us we wasn't gonna make it. She wasn't gonna, I wasn't gonna be able to carry her. In fact, that happened all the way up to me being about 7 months. I actually had a doctor who told us, yeah, I'd be surprised if you last through the night. But by grace of God, she's here. Even my 35th week, we went to the doctor for the last ultrasound, and they told us, your stomach has only grown as if you was 31 weeks, her stomach rather. And I was like, what do you mean? We've had ultrasound, and after ultrasound, why are you guys just not telling us this? And they was like, never showed up. I say, so what does this mean now? She's like, well, ultimately we have to send you to see a specialist, and we will have to go from there. But if it is that her stomach has only grown as if you was 31 weeks, then it's a very big possibility she can become a stillborn. So we will have to hurry up and make you go into labor, otherwise she will be a stillborn. So we went to the whole, ordeal. We went to the specialist. They agreed with the doctor. They told me that my placenta wasn't producing enough blood flow and oxygen that was reaching her stomach and her brain. So when you think about that, you think about abnormalities and all kinds of emotions. And I'm like big and pregnant. I already can't breathe, and now I'm dealing with this. So, but by the grace of God, everything that they said that she was not going to be able to do, my daughter came out doing. She came out holding her bottle. She was the most active baby in the nursery. So I'm very grateful for that. I would pray over my stomach. He would pray over me and the baby. And we just went forward with it and believed that what God said is still going to come to pass. I mean, one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. If it had not been for my daughter, my drive and my focus on women empowerment probably wouldn't be as strong as it is, because again, I have to set the example for her. From a very little bitty girl, I was sexually assaulted when I was 4. Then again when I was 8, and in between those 2 periods it was repeatedly. One of them was with a family member. The other one was a neighbor who used to make my brother watch. That went on for about 3 months, and the third time I was about 14. So let me just digress. When I was about 4 and when I was about 8, that was my cousin. allowed him to do it because I didn't know any better. I just thought, that's how things went, and that was what I was supposed to do. And because of those roles, I began to have a very distant relationship with my mother. I felt like, I was angry with her. I can almost say that at the time, I hated her because I was like, it's your job to protect me, and you didn't protect me. This happened right under your nose, and you didn't know. So, and then when it happened when I was 14, it was actually when I was 8, it was my neighbor's, it was her boyfriend, and it was right under, that happened right under my mother's nose. All she did was work, and I didn't understand it until I became to be a mother. She did the best that she could to provide for us. So, during that time, I became the black sheep of the family because I rebelled against my mother. I rebelled against anybody that came in contact with me because I was so hurt. I didn't understand why these things kept happening to me. So I would begin to run away from home. I was just off. I started running away from home like at 10. I was off doing all kinds of stuff. So let me just fast forward. When I was about 14, I was raped by I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was raped by one of my friend's brother. And that was very damaging because I had to, for a long time, I kept it because it was like you was in the wrong place. You had no business being. Me and my mom didn't already have a good relationship. So that's what it was. And then I was always labeled as you was gonna be the first one to get pregnant. So that was another reason why I kept what I kept. So I just got tired of just being labeled. I got tired of people's opinions. I had a family member to tell me that you will always be on the outside looking in. You will never be in a game. And she said it to another person while I was sitting right there in front of her. So those seeds that was planted, those words that was spoken, has stuck with me for a very long time. The reason being because I couldn't do anything. Every time I wanted to go for something in school, I thought about those words. There's no need for me to try out. I'm not gonna make it anyway. So now I'm in a place in life where I don't believe I believe what God says about me. His word is what matters to me. I know that I am. Anything that you put behind I am is powerful. So that's why God gave me the vision of I am empowered. I want to empower other women to move past the opinions of what other people have said. All the things that's held them bound. Me being raped, me being molested, me being just labeled and not being light enough, that has really formed me. But again, I go back to my favorite scripture, Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good, because had not those things happened to me, I would not have the passion I have now for little girls. I wouldn't have the passion I have for women and uplifting and us coming together as one. The suicide attempts. Actually came very young. I was 8. I remember, bringing a knife to school because I just didn't want to live anymore. I was already told I wasn't going to be nothing. And I had men constantly violating me, in front of my younger brother. Just, it was just so much. I just did not want to be here. I didn't believe, grew up in church. And I'm like, God, if you're there, why do you keep allowing these things to happen? And so I tried to commit suicide. I brought a knife to school, and I think in hindsight, I really didn't want to do it because I told one of my classmates, I was like, I'm just going to kill myself. And so while I'm going through the counseling, when I was 14, after me being raped, I took like 3 bottles of pills and it wasn't successful, as you can see. And I just didn't want to be here. I felt like my mom didn't love me. I felt like I had no family. I had no support. So, of course, I had a child early when I was 16. Well, I didn't have her. I actually had an abortion because I was too focused on what people was gonna say. I was already been labeled as the first one to get pregnant, so I wanted to prove everybody wrong. So told my mom I was pregnant. She's like, what do you want to do? I want to have an abortion. Are you sure? Yes, I want to have an abortion. I'm going to have an abortion. It's nothing nobody can say. I'm not going to be in high school with a child. So I had the abortion, and it took me literally 16 years to realize that the reason why I had the abortion was not because of me, it was because of everyone else. So fast forward a couple years later, I did wind up having my first child. Still not feeling good about myself because I still had a child. I had a second child in 2003, and it was at that moment, being embarrassed from having a second child out of wedlock, still young. It was at that moment, like I said, I've always grew up in church, but I never had a personal relationship for myself. So God told me to fast. And I was like, what? Fast? I thought that's something only Catholic people do. So I began, and he took me to the book of Matthew, where it says, if you fast secretly, I will reward you openly. I was living with my grandmother, and I wanted to get out of my grandmother's house so bad, me and my 2 children. And I was like, God, if you just bless me, what can I do? I want to be out of my current situation. And, I have a very loving grandmother, but I just wanted to be out. I just thought about all the things that happened from when I was younger to now. I'm basically in the same situation that people spoke on me that I was gonna be on the outside. So that's when he told me to fast. So I began to study, fasting, and I went in total consecration. I didn't talk to anybody. I wasn't on the internet. I only took a phone call unless it was business related because I was in search for a job. The job that I was in search for, that I wanted, was a traffic clerk at Harris County. So I fast 2 weeks, sun up, sundown. Even during the times that I wasn't fasting, I wasn't taking any calls. I wasn't listening to any music, nothing. It was just me and God all day. I remember going to my grandfather's closet, and I would just sit there while the kids would sleep, and I would just hold my Bible and just read my Bible and try to read it in the dark. So God led me to the leadership of a female pastor, and she was who I needed, who I knew God had sent at that time, because I began to pray. I began to study spiritual warfare. I went to classes on soul ties and, seeing how different things connect. When you connect to someone sexually, you connected to them spiritually. And that's how I began to have my own relationship with the Heavenly Father. Since I have done that, my faith walk has been on different levels. I don't know if that makes sense. I went from having my own personal relationship with God to really studying His Word, and it's so funny because it was a point where I knew what I needed to know in that season that I was in at that time frame. And it's but my mindset still was not right. I would read His Word, I would believe things, but I wasn't really believing what God said. And it was under my old pastor leadership that she told me that, you have to sometimes remind God what He said. When you go into prayer, you have to tell Him, God, you said that you will supply all my needs. God, you said that it shall. And know that she taught me that those words was very powerful. You hold Him to His promise. You hold Him to the covenant that He gave you. I became my pastor, his wife, armor bearer. I was very active in church, but it was still things deep down inside inside of me that I was still dealing with. Oftentimes as Christians, we're taught, oh, well, you're a Christian, so you shouldn't have these problems. You shouldn't be still dealing with the same issues. So I used to believe that, like, no, I'm gonna just keep everything inside. Wrong. And it wasn't until really that I met my daughter's dad. And it was so funny because we actually went to school together. But it was in that season where he told me to borrow his belief system. And I was like, no, I don't believe what God said. Yeah, you are not God. But he was like, no, read the book summary, reading the audio. So when I began to change the way I thought, then everything became clear. One of the things I had to learn to do was detach myself from certain people, because it's a difference between family members and relatives. So during this journey, I had to learn that everybody that maybe have your same blood is not necessarily good for you. So I went through a season where God had to separate me, especially someone who was very close to me, who's a relative, but she was more like my mom. He had to separate me because I was so used to doing everything that she told me. So God had to put me by myself so I could just focus on him and believe the things that he said about me. So when I started doing that, then that's when my mindset started changing. The music I listened to started changing. The people that I was around, the people I was connected to started changing. Straight talk, woman talk. I remember when I first saw the flyer around it was right before Christmas when I first saw the flyer, and I did not know Porshea Wilkins. I followed her. I don't think she knew this at the time, but I followed her for like 2 years, but I had never met her. And I saw a flyer that she had about Straight Talk, Woman Talk. It's basically a platform that women can come and be their authentic selves. Oftentimes as women, we're so busy competing and doing things against each other. It was never a platform, especially from social media and the generation that we live in, that where we can come to as women and just be very transparent. One thing I loved about Porshea is that she was very transparent. What you see on social media is what you get in person. And I was one of those people, I was very, leery of who I connected to and who I went to. I saw who she was on social media, but it wasn't until I saw her at the Christmas party that I was like, oh yeah, what I see on social media is what it is in person. And so I was like, it took me one Straight Talk, Woman Talk. After that, it was a wrap. I was trying to share it with everyone. It's really made me just look at myself as a woman and just really pull through some of the issues and some of the battles that I was still going through. It helped me to overcome a lot of my mental challenges. I am Symira Shelton. I am a daughter of the Most High. I am empowered, and I am one of the 333.